Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin. This is our tour through my Penguin Classic wall, and yesterday we talked about the selected writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, and today I thought we would go over the Penguin Classic edition of the minor pseudepigrapha of the lesser Aromatus of Gaul, in a translation by... Just kidding, BookTube. I put you through Thomas Aquinas yesterday, so I thought today we might put the classic back in Penguin Classics. And today we will talk about someone who put Aquinas in heaven. And that is Dante, the great Florentine poet Dante. Specifically, the Divine Comedy in the Penguin Classic, which has a long history and many different versions. So we have a lot to talk about. The Divine Comedy is not going to present us with any of the problems that we have talked about the pitiless ratio of the survival of the manuscript. But boy, oh boy, is it going to present us with problems about translation. Boy, oh boy, is it ever. This is a feast and also a nightmare for translators because it is a bizarrely complicated and interwoven and folded back upon itself origami work of fiction. But it is also incredibly elusive. Not elusive, allusive. It references an incredible, enormous array of things. And it does so often, most often, in incredibly oblique terms. It's entirely likely, for instance, in the Paradiso, the passage that I mentioned, that puts St. Thomas Aquinas in paradise, it's entirely likely for a reader who doesn't know what they're reading to never know that that's what's being talked about. And that goes on and on. That happens often. Dante often, very often, in the three parts of the Commedia, he will often refer to people by a reference or description, an epithet, rather than their name, and never, virtually never, goes into any kind of detail about them. But they all have details. Quite a few of the figures who show up in this poem were real people. And knowing who they were and what they did in their real life is absolutely crucial to understanding why Dante is showing them you in the first place. But he's not telling you that. So, like I mentioned, it's a feast for translators. It's a monstrous amount of work. In many ways, far more work than, for instance, translating the Iliad. It's a three-part poem in which a narrator from our world, from the normal world of Earth, a narrator who we can take to be Dante, don't have to do that, but we can take it to be him, narrates the chronicle of his journey through the three after realms of Christian mythology. This character goes to hell, and all the various circles and depths of hell, where all sorts of people, humans, are punished forever in punishments that are somehow allegorical to their crimes or nature on Earth. Then the character ascends to purgatory, and we see the same thing, people being punished, only this time it's not forever. And eventually the character, the narrator, ascends to paradise, to heaven, and sees the beauties of that realm, which it makes the third book, the Paradiso, the Paradise, the strangest of the three, and the toughest to sell. I've been sharing the Divine Comedy, urging it on people for a very long time, and the Paradiso is when I lose people, typically. That's when I don't understand any of this anymore, and it's high time I told you over wine and calzones here at your house that I haven't understood this book for quite some time, since probably the first or second canto of the Purgatorio. That's okay. That's okay. It's perfectly all right to be daunted by the Commedia. It's perfectly okay to be that, especially if you're reading it in English, because it's not just the allusions and the references and the imbricated nature of the thing, where it's all horoscopy and it's laid out in an extremely complex mathematical formula that Dante was very aware of, and it was governing what he did, and that itself was dug deep roots in Neoplatonism and the horology of his day. It's not just that. It's also Dante's Italian. He chose to write this in the vernacular, and he chose to do it in a way that defies translation. Now, just a little while ago, we talked about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and I mentioned that I, for a long time, believed the normal disclaimers of translators that this poem can't really be translated into English. And then I saw someone in our own present day, a young man, translate it into English, leaving nothing out, changing it just enough so that it was English, but definitely giving you the feeling of how weird and surreal the original is. So I hold out hope for Dante. I hold out hope that this can be done. But I have read every English translation of the Commedia, and, well, we're going to see. I'm going to let you judge for yourself how successful they are, because we have quite a few translations to talk about. Penguin did 2 translations for a long, long time. Two just parallel publishing translations. One of them was by Dorothy Sayers. This is the Penguin Classic version of her. She named hers Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven. And this is her Hell. And Dorothy Sayers graduated with a first from Oxford. She was an extremely well-educated person who also translated other things for Penguin Classics. I think she translated the Song of Roland. And if I remember correctly, this Penguin Classic, the author's biography was dictated by her. And I want to read it to you and see if you can tell me what's missing. Let's see, where is it here? Dorothy Sayers translated the Song of Roland in addition to Dante's Comedy for Penguin Classics. She graduated with first honors in French from Somerville College, Oxford in 1915. In 1916 and 1918, she published 2 volumes of poetry. Her first novel appeared in 1923, and she later wrote 13 more books of fiction, including The 9 Tailors, a fascinating novel about campanology. She also wrote religious plays, notably The Man Born to be King, and she died in 1957. Anything missing from that? As it goes to show you what was on her mind. It goes to show you maybe what was on her editor's minds at Penguin to have her taken seriously as a translator of the Commedia, maybe not mention the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries that sold in the millions. No, instead, let's mention her religious plays. She did painstakingly worked on her translation of the Commedia, and also fierce notes, an enormous amount of critical apparatus that Penguin reprints. I don't think this is partially a shelf tour, so I get to kvetch now and then. I had the 3-volume mass market paperbacks of the Dorothy Sayers Dante. I know that I have never gotten rid of those. I know that I have them. I cannot find them. I absolutely cannot find them. A lot of these Penguin shelves behind me are double stacked, but I thought they were all double stacked trade paperback size on top of trade paperback size so that no mass market paperbacks could be hidden. But I have looked everywhere for those, and I do not find the mass markets. I don't find my Purgatory or Heaven either. Just this for Dorothy Sayers. So I know they're here. I would not have gotten rid of those even to you. So they've got to be here. I just need to find them. But the Dorothy Sayers, it's understandable to me that Penguin Classic would do this. It's understandable to me that they would keep it in print even when they had someone else translating the Divine Comedy. Because Dorothy Sayers, no matter what she says in her author note, was an incredibly famous translator for another reason. She was an incredibly beloved author to millions of readers who might try her translation of the Divine Comedy because of the Lord Peter Wimsey novels. But I want to read you the beginning of Dorothy Sayers' actual translation. Now, keep in mind, her critical stuff, her introduction, and especially her notes are amazing. And that's not a small thing because you need notes for this author. I love to say, as everyone does, every champion of the classics loves to say, no, you don't need anything. You don't need any critical apparatus, just a good, clear translation, and you're off to the races. You don't need anyone to explain this. It didn't live this long by being explained. But I honestly think that you will start to take on water right away with Dante if you don't have notes, and that you won't get to the Purgatorio without them. If you do, it'll just be one nonsense name after another with no resonance. The resonance in many, many cases in Dante, the resonance of the scene where a person is introduced and they're suffering in a certain way, or they say a certain thing to Dante, or he says a certain thing to them, or does a certain thing to them, kicks them. The resonances in those situations are never explained. They are always left to the notes. And they always have been. And you'll lose it. You'll just plain lose that if you don't have them. But for now, I mean, I want to praise that with Dorothy Sayers because her critical apparatus for this poem is great. But for now, let's just listen to her translation. This is her translation of the beginning of Canto 1. In the beginning of Canto 1, the narrator finds himself lost in the woods. He has strayed from the true path, and he's about to encounter animals who will represent future paths that he can take, and he will also eventually encounter his guide, the poet Virgil, and begin his descent into hell. But before he does that, this is how Canto 1 opens, and this is Dorothy Sayers' translation. Midway this way of life we're bound upon, I woke to find myself in a dark wood, where the right road was wholly lost and gone. Ay me, how hard of it to speak, that rude and rough and stubborn forest, the mere breath of memory stirs the old fear in the blood. It is so bitter, it goes nigh to death, yet there I gain such good, that, to convey the tale, I'll write what else I found therewith. How I got into it I cannot say, because I was so heavy and full of sleep, when first I stumbled from the narrow way. And that was done, I didn't tell you, that was done in 1949, and I think we can agree it's bad. Right? It's bad. I don't know if you picked it out. You would have to be reading it to sort of pick it out because it's so inept. But that is an attempt at alternating rhymes. Upon and gone, rude and blood, death and therewith. The reason that your ear didn't hear it is because it scans all wrong and because there aren't any good rhymes. And yet Dorothy Sayers persists in that for the whole of her translation. And we have things like therewith. We have a midway this way of life we're bound upon. Where is it here? That tale I'll write, what else I found therewith. It's wooden, it's cumbrous, it's stuffy, it's scholarly in a fussy and unreadable way, and it doesn't get any better. It goes on for 3 volumes this way. Labored, mannered, for her translation itself, which, again, I want to stress, is only part of what you need to enjoy this book. But hers was not the only Penguin translation. There were others, like, for instance, Mark Musa. This is Mark Musa's Paradise. Or no, his Inferno. This is his Inferno. This book has seen better days. This has been punched all to hell and gone. This is Mark Musa also did a verse translation. This is from 1971, and I want to read you. Penguin also did 3 volumes of his Dante in mass markets. Excuse me, and I believe also in trade. I used to have all 3 of them. I don't know where they are. I know that my Purgatory and my Paradise for Mark Musa are in the same waterlogged and bloated condition, but I didn't get rid of them. I know I didn't get rid of them, so I don't know where they are. But let's see what he does for Canto 1, because this is also a Penguin classic. Midway along the journey of our life, I woke to find myself in a dark wood, for I had wandered off from the straight path. How hard it is to tell what it was like, this wood of wilderness, savage and stubborn. The thought of it brings back all my old fears. A bitter place. Death could scarcely be bitterer. But if I would show the good that came of it, I must talk about things other than the good. How I entered there I cannot say. I had become so sleepy at the moment when I first strayed, leaving the path of truth. Okay. So that was done 30 years later than Dorothy Sayers, and I think we can agree it's bad. That is really, really bad. It is totally uninviting as the beginning of an incredibly long poem. Totally uninviting. Bitterer? What on earth? What on earth is that? And also, he mentions that the wood was savage and stubborn, and so does Dante, and so does Dorothy Sayers, but we don't think of woods as stubborn. You have to come up with another word. Something other than that. That stops the reading mind. And there are plenty of others here. What was it? What was the other? Yeah, but if I would show the good that came of it, I must talk about things other than the good. it's all very wordy. It's all very roundabout. It's not easy or pleasant reading at all. That is another Penguin classic. Penguin did these two simultaneously. You could go into a store back when there were stores and back when they had backstock, and you would have a number of different Penguin classics to choose from. And that's not the only. There's one more Penguin translation that I want to show you, and this is by Robin Kirkpatrick. I had the trade paperback size editions of all the individual volumes of the Kirkpatrick translation from Penguin Classics. I don't know why. I don't know why I can find those and I can't find Dorothy Sayers or Mark Musa. I don't have John Ciardi. I know that he's probably the Penguin, the Dante that you have on your shelf is probably John Ciardi. I don't like his translation at all, but I don't need to have it in front of me to know that it suffers from all the same things that we're talking about. You will see them if you pull him down off the shelf. But this is, I have the individual volumes by Kirkpatrick, but then Penguin came out with a Penguin Classic Deluxe edition. And we haven't seen many of those lately. They don't tend to do a lot of Penguin Classic Deluxe editions for the medieval authors, unfortunately. But Dante belongs to all time. He's not just medieval. This poem has been translated and pondered over and loved by everybody in a way that will never happen to the Venerable Bede. And so Penguin came out with a Penguin Classic Deluxe edition that's very, very nice of the Divine Comedy. And there you have the 3 panels. There you have one of the punishments of the damned on the back. You have the French flaps. There's our character wandering in a wood. That's French flap on the front, and then on the back, there is Dante. That is our author. And these, let me see, these illustrations are by Eric Drucker. And they make for the Penguin Classic Deluxe editions. We mentioned them a couple of times, but we'll see many more of them. They're just lovely. They have the extra sturdy binding. They have the deckled edges. They have the French flaps and the originally commissioned artwork. Penguin doesn't always pull new editions into these things. They will often just reprint what they have. And so when I was going through my Penguins to make this video and to do, the March of the Penguins, one of the fringe benefits of this whole thing that I'm doing all this year is that it's helping me to gain control over my Penguin Classic library, to see, okay, why do you have 4 copies of this one thing? You don't need 4 copies of this, and the 3 extra copies that you don't need are taking up space that is badly needed on these shelves. You have lots that are double stacked. Same thing here. I don't know why I have individual volumes of this if I have this volume. And I don't know why I have other translations in Penguin if I myself am the first to admit that they fail in every way. But let's see how Robin Kirkpatrick does for Canto number 1. This is Canto number 1 of the Inferno. At one point midway on our path in life, I came around and found myself now searching through a dark wood, the right way blurred and lost. How hard it is to say what that wood was. A wilderness, savage, brute, harsh, wild. Only to think of it renews my fear. So bitter, that thought, that death is hardly more so. But since my theme will be the good fortune I found there, I mean to speak of other things I saw. I do not know, I cannot rightly say, how first I came to be there, so full of sleep, that moment, abandoning the true way on. And that was done in 2006, and I think you'd agree it's bad. That is bad. It's disjointed. First of all, it succumbs to idiom in the second line. I came around what, a corner? No, it takes your reading mind a minute to realize, oh wait, he's saying I woke up. I came around. I woke up. I came to. But 200 years ago, nobody thought of that as a synonym for waking up, and 200 years from now, they won't either. And we're talking about something topographical. If you were on a bench just stationary, I came around would stand out as a means of saying I woke up. But we're talking about someone moving through a wood. So I came around automatically starts to feel like it's a bad choice. It's a bad translator choice. It's not Dante's fault. It's a bad translator's choice. Same thing with that padding. I do not know. I cannot rightly say. The middle passage there, the one that's given so much trouble to Dorothy Sayers and Mark Musa, he kind of handles well. That so bitter, that thought, that death is hardly more so. But since my theme will be the good I found there, I mean to speak of other things I saw. That at least is a little bit clearer, but it has enormous problems. My theme is going to be what I saw there, so I will speak of other things. Well, you're not going to speak of your theme. You know what he means, but it's labored. It's a labored way of doing it, and also so bitter that thought, that death is hardly more so. That those two that's in a row throw the reading eye off. It's poorly done. it's poorly done. Those are tiny things, but they add up, especially when it becomes clear before you're out of the first canto of the first book in the Commedia. When it becomes clear that this translator is not aware of those ticks, so they're gonna just keep building up like the snows of yesteryear. And that's going to drag you down when you've already got enough working against you in this poem. Oh, look at that. Brookline Booksmith. Well, they're closed for the duration. What's this other one? Capitol Hill Books in Denver. Is Capitol Hill Books in Denver even still a shop? I mean, they're closed now, but are they even still there? I don't know. Anyway, the notes for the Kirkpatrick edition are pretty good. They're about as good as Mark Musa. I myself love the fervent fanaticism of Dorothy Sayers' notes, which makes me want to, with these penguins, it makes me want to switch and move around. None of these translations are any good. But I'd like to mash the notes together. That would be great. And of course, there are millions of other translations of Dante and millions of other options for explanatory notes, which I believe with this book you really need. I'd be the first person to say that you don't, if you didn't, because I don't like the idea of any classic depending on explanation. But this one does, and it always has. So, I mean, even in Dante's own lifetime, people needed to be informed. Okay, they had a bad history, him and that person that he has tortured forever. So this is the Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition. And really, I mean, the interest that I have in the Mark Musa and the Dorothy Sayers is outweighed by the fact that this is really the only Penguin Dante that I need. I certainly don't need multiple copies of multiple other people, especially multiple copies of the separate books in here. But that, of course, doesn't end Dante. I mean, because where would we stop? If we stopped there, we would stop with Penguin Classics not really doing right by its readers for Dante, which they don't. But part of the implication that I've made here is that nobody can. So I thought we'd look afield and see if that holds out. Like, for instance, let's look at 2 more translations and see if it's just Penguin picking poorly or if nobody does this right. And the next one that we'll go to is my beloved Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. This is the Fall River, the lovely Fall River edition, light as a feather, done on very lightweight paper, of the whole of the Commedia. It has Inferno in big letters, but this is actually Divine Comedy. And in addition to the whole of it, it also has all of the great engravings by Gustave Dore. Not just 1 or 2, but all of them, which is just fantastic. Look at that. That's just fantastic. Look at that. Look at how far it goes the distance there. I love the Dore engravings. I just absolutely love them. What I wouldn't give, oh my God, what I wouldn't give if Penguin Classics, or somebody, even Fall River Classics, had done a King James Bible with the Dore illustrations. What I wouldn't give to have that. Oh my. Because Dore also did engravings for all the way through the Bible. And that would be the perfect King James Bible for me. If it exists and you know about it, a 1-volume King James Bible with all of the Dore engravings, oh, let me know. But Longfellow, of course, was a poet on his own, and any of you who have read Matthew Pearl's terrific murder mystery, the Dante Club, will know all about the efforts that he and a bunch of other New England intellectuals 100 years ago went to translate Dante into English for America for the first time. And I also love Longfellow as a poet. I absolutely love him. So you might think that I'm basing that on the fact that he does a better job than the 3 translators that we've seen so far, and he doesn't. So let's read the same portion of Canto 1. This is Longfellow. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Ah me, how hard a thing it is to say what was this forest savage, rough and stern, which in the very thought renews the fear. So bitter it is, death is little more. But of the good to treat, which I found, Speak will I of the other things I saw there. I cannot well repeat how I entered, so full was I of slumber at the moment in which I had abandoned the true way. And that was done in the 19th century, and I think we can agree it's bad. It's bad. You can't abandon a true way if you're asleep. You can't do anything if you're asleep. And a bunch of other things. That is constricting Dante to a certain rhythm and failing to convey what you know as a reader, even if you don't know anything about Dante, even if you don't know any Italian, of his Italian at all, never read him in the original at all, you still have to know, just by the fact that you've always heard of this book, and that you've seen a million editions of it, and that it's always been with us. Since Dante wrote it, it's always been with us. It has become an immediate part of the shared library of humanity, in a way that Gerald of Wales has not and never will be. So even if you don't know Italian, you know when you get to this poem that it can't be like that, right? You know it can't be like that, or it wouldn't have done that, or it wouldn't be what it is. You know that it can't be like that. So even if you don't know anything about translation, or don't know anything about Dante, you can still read something like we just heard and think, okay, I don't think that's good. But let's move on. We'll move on. We'll try one more, because my favorite... Oh, he's a wee. Hi, baby. That's all you care about anyway. Listening to me wind on about Dante. In fact, do you want your daily close-up of the bean? Yes. Oh, you would go straight to heaven. You would, baby. Oh. Baby bean. You would go straight to heaven. Yes, you would. Let's try one more Inferno. This is my favorite English language translation. This is by Alan Mandelbaum. This is a great edition. I have the Quality Paperback Book Club paperbacks here. This is that have Barry Moser illustrations all throughout. Let me show you. Look at that. Huh? Very different from Gustave Doré, and yet I love them. Absolutely love them. Yes. Look at that. Oh, so bleak. The Mandelbaum is dual language, so you have the English on one side and the Italian on the other. So you could, if you wanted to, like a certain crackpot in poetic history, teach yourself Italian purely by doing a cross reading with English and Italian of Dante's Inferno. Or at least you can teach yourself Dante's Latin. You can teach yourself a bit. And if you know a little Italian, even if you barely remember it from school, if you've got the facing Italian, you can start to read it out loud. And that, as I will get to it, that can be crucial. So let's see what Mandelbaum makes of this. When I had journeyed half of our life's way, I found myself within a shadowed forest, for I had lost the path that does not stray. Ah, it is hard to speak of what it was, that savage forest, dense and difficult, which even in recall renews my fear. So bitter, death is hardly more severe. But to retell the good discovered there, I'll also tell the other things I saw. I cannot clearly say how I entered the wood. I was so full of sleep just at the point where I abandoned the true path. That is not quite as bad as any of the things that we have heard. That is why this is my favorite translation, because that is not quite as bad. It's more followable. And Mandelbaum's notes are incredibly good. They're amazingly good. His introduction is amazingly good. The one problem here is that he has the Italian right in front of you. So even if you don't know Italian, if you start to read Canto number 1, just those lines, you will start to hear what you're missing. You will start to hear what the English has not brought forward. Now, I have read, I think, every major translation of this poem that has ever been made in English. I have never seen what happens in the Italian approximated in English. Not even close. What we just heard with Alan Mandelbaum is the closest, and what we heard in these Penguin Classics is far, far away. It's not anything that you would ever preserve for a decade, much less 5 centuries. And that fact had led me for a long time to say, well, that the reason I haven't seen it approximated in English is because it's impossible. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that. John Ciardi doesn't do it. What's his name? It's escaping me. It was a big hullabaloo 35 years ago when he came out with is it Hollander? No, it's not Hollander. Well, whoever. Nobody that I've seen does it in English, but and for a long time that led me to say it can't be done in English. But now I know better. We have the example of Gawain and the Green Knight in front of me. Now I know that it's just a matter of someone coming along who will do it correctly. And if that person pours all of their energy into doing that translation, and the translation finally brings forward the weird, gripping, sick readability of Dante in the original, but that person has no energy left over for notes, well, fine. We'll always have Dorothy Sayers' notes, or Mark Musa's notes, or Alan Mandelbaum's notes. I will settle for the translation. But in the meantime, you have 3 different penguins of Dante, and not one of the 3 of them is a recommend. Not for itself, not in and of itself. I recommend, of course, that you have the Dorothy Sayers Dante. I don't know why I don't. I wish that the Dorothy Sayers Dante had been the one that they put in this edition, with her notes. That's the one that deserves to be in a Penguin Classic Deluxe Edition. But, of course, I would suggest that you have her translations. They show a whole different side of her, the author of The Nine Tailors. If you're a fan of Dorothy Sayers, I would, of course, suggest that you have her Divine Comedy. But I can't recommend any of these as reading experiences. I can recommend them as learning experiences, but not as reading experiences. And yet, I can't actually recommend any of these translations as reading experiences, and yet I can very much recommend Dante. So it's a tough road down the middle. But anyway, we at least we're finished with Dante now, so we'll move on to somebody else tomorrow. Maybe somebody also who's really big, and get a few really big classics out of the Penguin Classic lineup. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.